Welcome to the Thyroid Fixer podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Amy, and we're diving deep into the world of hormones, especially for all you fierce women in perimenopause and menopause, and anyone dealing with hypothyroidism. If you're struggling with weight gain, you feel like shedding those pounds is an impossible feat. If you're dealing with plummeting energy levels, gut-wrenching fatigue, or a libido that seems to have left town, then you're in the right place. And don't even get me started on the hair loss. If these symptoms are sounding all too familiar, you found your tribe. Welcome, because my goal is to educate, empower, and shake up your world. I want you to embrace every inch of that badass woman that you truly are. So if you're ready to dive in and fix things, let's get started. I have recommended Quicksilver Scientific products for years, so I can definitely attest to their quality, their effectiveness. And then there's Dr. Chris Shade. He is a genius when it comes to developing liposomal delivery systems that are unmatched. You cannot match his delivery method anywhere in the world. He is a groundbreaking scientist. So when we're looking at detox, specifically heavy metal detox, support of the liver, his detox protocols are amazing. The push couch liver detox is unparalleled. You don't need these lengthy, expensive detox programs. You just don't. Do the push catch, do the liposomal glutathione, throw in some GABA L-theanine to calm the nervous system, get great sleep. That's all you need. And here's the other kicker that I really love. He has a drink easy bundle. So we all know that alcohol is very, very toxic, but we're social creatures. Some of us like to go out and be social, have a beautiful glass of wine with a red steak, right? Well, with the Drink Easy bundle, you can do that without having the hangover effect the next day, without crushing your liver. It gives total support with milk thistle, bitters, liposomal glutathione, once again. So you put all these together and your body is literally set up to detox from all the harsh environmental chemicals and toxins that we are bombarded with on a daily basis. So you're going to go to quicksilverscientific.com/Dr. Amy and use the code Dr. Amy. That is going to give you 15% off your order. That's going to allow you to try the glutathione, the push catch, the Drink Easy bundle. So you're going to go to quicksilverscientific.com/DRAMIE and use the code DRAMIE for 15% off. Talking again about the importance of getting in your protein, but it's hard to do. I get it. So I bring you a solution, Paleo Valley beef sticks. Now, when we're talking about beef sticks or jerky, there's so much out there on the market, and a lot of them will claim that their beef is grass-fed just as long as it was fed grass at some point in its life. But really, the cows are fed grains, and they're just sprinkled in some grass-fed, marketed that way. And they can say that it's American-made as long as it's packaged in America. You don't want that. Paleo Valley grass-fed beef sticks are the real deal. They are sourced from 100% grass-fed and grass-finished cows, never fed grains or harmful antibiotics, and they come from small family-owned farms right here in the USA, and they're good. So you want to grab some of these, add them in throughout the day, fantastic snack on the go. Go to paleovalley.com/thyroid, and that's going to save you 15% off. So PALEOVALLEY.com/thyroid, THYROID, and save 15%. Dr. Josh Helman, I am so excited to have you on today because we're talking about Alzheimer's, and many of my listeners know, who've been listening to me for a while, know that this is near and dear to my heart. My mother passed away about 2-3 years ago of Alzheimer's. Her father passed away from Alzheimer's. And I just recently had my proper DNA tested. And yes, I have the APOE4 gene. Now, for years, even prior to knowing that I had that genetic SNP, I have been saying for years and years and years and years, if I knew
what I know now about Alzheimer's, and I'm going to learn a ton more today, I would have had my mom who lived on bread with every meal, diet Pepsi every day. And she was one of the many women who had their hormones ripped away from them when the Women's Health Initiative study came out. So if I just even changed that with her and got her insulin down and got her hormones in, I really feel like we could maybe prevent it, maybe not, maybe just extended her quality of life. Don't know. But obviously, with me being in that genetic lineage, this is very important to me. And as we were talking off there, it should be very important to every listener out there, especially women. And they should start paying attention and finding this topic of importance 20 years before you think you're going to get Alzheimer's. So right now, 40s, 50s, 60s, now's the time to start listening, like listen up today and take notes, because there are things that we can do to prevent. So that was a long-winded intro, but thank you for being here.
Thanks, Dr. Amy. I appreciate you interviewing me. This is great.
Well, like I said, this is near and dear to my heart. And, for myself, obviously, I know what I just stated, right? So I know to keep my insulin in check. Don't walk around insulin resistant. I certainly don't load up on processed carbohydrates and sugars, because we are seeing that Alzheimer's is type 3 diabetes these days, correct?
That's true. And just to be clear, though, we now know that each case is different, but when you look at the root causes, you're dealing with between 30 and 100 or more different causes. And definitely insulin resistance is one of the pieces of the puzzle.
I guess let's start with if you can go through just all the different causes or what we should be thinking about when we're talking about Alzheimer's. Then I want to get into, what is it? What are we seeing as the progression? I've heard varying things of it's the plaque on the brain, but we know it's not the plaque on the brain. It's something else. So can you, break down the causes and then what we're learning now and what the latest research is per se?
Right. So turns out not only is every case a little bit different, but when you're dealing with between, say, 30 and 100 or more different causes, we don't have time to go over every single one.
Yeah.
So we'll go over categories, but obviously that's why, prevention I think is key, and you want to you want to work with an expert on it. So one category you've already mentioned is going to be insulin resistance. Mm-hmm. There's no question that we see an association. Another big category that's come out of analysis of, using machine learning of, thousands of different cases of Alzheimer's is, surprisingly enough, disordered sleep.
Okay.
And connecting the dots here, I think what's going on is we now know that sleep is important time for basically the brain to get rid of debris, and specifically you want deep sleep, and you want enough deep sleep. And if you don't have that for whatever reason, that's an increased risk. So,
okay.
if you're snoring, if you just have bad sleep hygiene, right? I mean, if you leave the lights on, or whatever it is, I would definitely pay attention to sleep as a category. And that's, to me, it was shocking though that was like the number one risk that I saw.
Wow. Okay, so let me ask you this. So my mom, and then passed down to me, did have also a history of sleep issues, to where she would often take Xanax or drink wine, right, to get to sleep, because that's
Right.
what women think are going to help their sleep. Now we know that that's very disruptive. And really from the age of 25 up to about 5 years ago, so we're talking about 20 years, I had to take either Benadryl, Ambien, Xanax, something to sleep. Now I've cracked that code. Obviously, being amongst colleagues like yourself, I have learned different tools, tricks, better sleep hygiene. Now I'm using, different herbals and whatnot to get to sleep. And I've stayed away from the benzos, but even the 20 years of benzos between my mom and I, not so good, right? When we're taking the things to force us to sleep.
Yeah, so let's just so people understand. There's no question that if you drink alcohol or take benzos like Valium, that will get you to sleep. The problem is it won't be a good deep sleep, the type of deep sleep you need for the body to clean out the debris and clear any amyloid plaque and things like that.
Okay.
So but I wouldn't, I wouldn't kick yourself for, doing that for 20 years. That the point is it's still fixable. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not a fan of Benadryl or other medications to get you to sleep in the long term. Sure, like if you have a very stressful day, one or two times, but that's why I'm not a big fan of alcohol, because it works the same way. It might make you sleepy, but you're not going to have the deep sleep that you want, that your brain needs.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. So what else we got?
All right. So another category is actually infections. And when I say infections, there's a whole different categories, from things like viruses, whether it's, herpes virus, lots of different viruses. The Lyme spirochete has been found in samples from Lewy bodies. So the answer is yes. And then there are definitely certain types of associations with toxoplasmosis or other parasites. So it's almost any type of infection you can think of. Normally we have a blood-brain barrier that keeps infections from getting to the brain. Unfortunately, if you have inflammation and other problems, there's definitely an association with the leaky gut. The same type of mechanisms that keep a barrier in your gut is a similar biological mechanism at the cellular level that keeps infections from the brain. So yeah, so there's definitely lots of different types of infections, and we know now that amyloid plaque is actually the body's response to infection. The amyloid plaque will actually stop bugs in their track.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so that goes along the lines of what I was saying in the beginning, that now we're saying some different things about the plaque and kind of how it gets there and what its purpose is. So yeah, we'll circle back to that.
A brief preview is that Big Pharma has come up, with 30 plus different drugs to attack the amyloid plaque. And often it doesn't work because you don't get to the root cause.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So even something like Epstein-Barr virus, that chronic infection that, quite honestly, I really believe we all have, because I've yet to meet a patient that doesn't have EBV, even the dormant state. So is something like that an infection that can trigger the amyloid plaque?
It can.
Okay.
But it's not just Epstein-Barr virus. It's also, I think, the COVID virus. I think people with the long COVID syndrome, one of the reasons we see that is, for whatever reason, that virus helps destroy the blood-brain barrier. It makes it a lot easier for other infections and toxins to get into the brain. And with that, I would say that's the next category, would be different types of toxins.
Okay.
Whether you're talking about heavy metals or petrochemicals, mold toxins. I mean, there are so many different categories there, and many of these are man-made. The petrochemicals that didn't exist, before the Industrial Revolution. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I've heard people doing certain type of blood cleanses, and these are like overseas type of treatments, but where Dr. Tom O'Brien talked about this, where the bag that filtered his blood actually had plastic particles in it. And now we know that as humans drinking out of plastic water bottles and plastic everything, we literally have plastic in us. So yeah, I mean, you want to talk toxins and your body's response to them. My gosh, it's crazy. And that's what you can actually see in the bag. That's not counting all of the glyphosate and the pesticides, herbicides, everything, that the body wash and body lotion that we put on our bodies to smell good, and how that's soaking in. So our bodies are bombarded with toxins these days.
Right. And it could definitely be overwhelming if you want to clear all that stuff out of your diet and out of your lifestyle. But I would just encourage people not to get overwhelmed, just take one step at a time. And to me, the sad thing is just because something's available for sale doesn't mean it's necessarily safe. That's been a lesson that, yeah,
Yeah.
that's been difficult, but it's
Yeah.
true. Yeah, so definitely toxins are a piece of it. And then another category I would put would be inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
So people with inflammatory diseases, or inflammation could be a side effect of some of the toxins we just mentioned. Yeah.
So, yeah, break down inflammation for me, because I think too often, even these days, that word is used so much, and to the point where people are starting to tune it out because, oh, yeah, inflammation, inflammaging, all of that. But truly, what is inflammation? It's the body's response to, like you said, the toxins or the heavy metals or even an infection. You're going to become inflamed. So we think of inflammation. Okay, I bruised my elbow and it's inflamed and red and I can see it. But what is inflammation when it's in the body?
The way to think about inflammation is it's simply an overeager or too much of your body's immune system. So yeah, we need an immune system. We need an immune system to fight infection. We need an immune system to help with healing, like for example, our skin after a cut. The immune system is good. Unfortunately, there are things that we're exposed to that can rev it up too much. So as an example, if you have gluten in your diet, whether you're sensitive or not, gluten will stimulate the immune response. Now, different people have different levels, but in general, gluten's a stimulator, and there are other. We see it in lots of different types of processed foods, and in addition to toxins, and there unfortunately there's some people with hereditary inflammatory diseases, but normally in my clinical experience, like for example, patients with inflammatory bowel disease, normally it's related to what people are eating. If processed food is the normal staple, and by the way, for the typical Western American diet, it is.
It is.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
But that's what's targeted by marketing, and it's definitely addictive, and
Right.
it can be really hard. I mean, it's a true addiction. I mean, people are addicted to salt, oil, and sugar, where our brains are programmed to be, but then we have these hyper palatable foods,
Mhm.
and the side effect of those foods are too much inflammation. And I'm not saying if you have one processed meal, it's all over. No, but if that's a pattern, if it's every day, yeah, that's the problem.
Okay. Now you said about an amped up immune system. So I'm thinking about autoimmune conditions. Are those with autoimmune conditions, specifically Hashimoto's, more prone to inflammation and thus more prone to getting Alzheimer's, or is there not a connection there?
Oh, there's definitely a connection. So what will happen is, in general terms, if your or anyone's immune system is revved up too high, it's part of the immune system are white blood cells that are going out looking for invaders. And unfortunately, if you have too many, every so often they're going to come across some of your own cells, and they're going to make a mistake, and they're going to say, oh, we have a problem here. But it's not. It's a make believe problem. But the problem is when your immune system is revved up, boom, it puts you at increased risk of getting an autoimmune disease.
Okay.
So it's definitely related.
That's related. Yeah. Okay. And then what about hormones? So I'm really interested. I know we talked a little bit before the show about the importance of hormones, and where I deal with hormones in the bioidentical space is telling women the benefits of, and of course, one of the benefits of hormone replacement therapy, specifically estrogen. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on the stats on this, but I believe replacing estrogen, as long as you start within those first 5 years post-menopause, can reduce your risk of Alzheimer's by 67%.
That sounds about right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Talk to me about
Yeah.
the hormone component.
Yeah. So, and it's not just estrogen, as you mentioned, it's thyroid. It's in my clinical experience, the brain is no different from any other organ. different organs in the body are designed, hormones are just communication tools, and they're designed to have the right level of communications. If your brain is not getting the right levels of thyroid or estrogen, or there are lots of other hormones besides those, but if the brain will not function normally or ideally if it's not getting the right hormone mix. Now, the interesting thing is the brain is the master is the master organ. So the brain is actually responsible ultimately for the production of hormones. And it's kind of a catch-22, right? Because if the parts of your brain that trigger hormone production aren't working, then like it's a whole system that's a downward spiral.
Right. So, and it's interesting. So you have the hypothalamus, pituitary, thyroid axis, the hypothalamus, pituitary, which, by the way, folks, hypothalamus and pituitary are located in the brain. And then we have the HP gonadal axis for the hormone. So it is, I mean, you're right, Josh, it starts in the brain. And what's interesting is I've had patients say to me, I think I'm getting early Alzheimer's. And they'll be, 40s, 50s, 60s. And that's how they feel. Now, I say, no, don't worry about it. You just have thyroid brain. But there really is something to what they're saying, because it's affecting them like Alzheimer's would, or maybe it is the beginning stages that we can back off once we start properly replacing their hormones. Is that right?
That's exactly right. And, and what's also interesting with Alzheimer's, it seems to be more common in women, and specifically normally women about 20 to 30 years after they hit menopause.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think, as your estrogen levels go down, all of a sudden your brain cells are more vulnerable to Alzheimer's and other, neurodegenerative diseases, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what I find insidious is that, it may take 30 years to develop Alzheimer's, but the first 20 years, you won't have any symptoms. You won't be aware of it, unless you're checking labs, looking at insulin resistance, hormone levels, infection issues, etc.
You've probably heard about collagen. I talk about it all the time. Love collagen. It's the protein that keeps your skin young and smooth. But did you know that your skin needs minerals to use that collagen properly? So your skin cells rely on close to a dozen minerals every day. Selenium, zinc reverses sun damage, copper helps your skin cells absorb collagen protein to become smoother and more elastic. Go copper. Silicon increases collagen uptake too. So if you want your skin to look smooth and hydrated, you have to make sure that you're getting enough minerals. And right now, the problem is 97% of Americans have at least one mineral deficiency, and then 70% have two or more. That's just crazy. So this is why I love Beam Minerals. Their liquid mineral supplements give you every single essential mineral your body uses in the right ratios. Beam makes minerals simple. You take a shot of liquid every morning. All your mineral needs are covered without a cabinet full of pills and powders. So if you want to support your skin and make sure your collagen supplements are actually working for your skin, then give Beam Minerals a try. Head to Beam Minerals, BeamMinerals.com, and use the code Dr. Amy for 20% off your first order.
And what's funny is most of us act in the now. So when I get patients coming to me, they're coming because they can't lose weight. They're gaining weight now. They're fatigued now. They have brain fog now. And it's really hard to shift people into thinking about the future, because we all tend to have that "it's not going to happen to me" thought. And even with my family history of it, I go, nope, not going to happen. Now, granted, I'm being proactive because of that family history and because of my genetics. So I can make the changes now to affect my genes and how they express. But I think it's really hard to get people to think long-term down the road, what's going to happen to me in 20 years and what I can do, or what can I do now? So how do you deal with your patients that you're working with right now to really start getting them to think long-term down the road, whether it's Alzheimer's or cancer or Parkinson's or anything, any of those diseases of aging? how do you get them to shift and pay attention now?
So first of all, it's just a general conversation. It's a lot easier to prevent a chronic disease like Alzheimer's or cancer than to try to reverse it once you have it. And then I'll have a discussion. So for example, I think it's important for people to know their genetics, specifically their ApoE4. If they're positive, sure, they're at a higher risk of getting Alzheimer's. They're also at a higher risk of dying prematurely. But the cool thing is, if they take steps, and some of these are not difficult steps, their risk is no longer increased. It's just, let's pay attention. Oh, you're ApoE4 positive. You know what? Let's check your omega-3 levels. Oh, they're low. And they may well be low because people with ApoE4 positive normally need higher levels of omega-3s. We'll just make sure that you take a higher level of a supplement than people who are not ApoE4 positive.
Right. And it's that simple. It's that simple.
Yeah. But it's sure, no one wants to get that information, but it's information you can do something about, as opposed to, I remember, many years ago, you used to be able to get your ApoE information from 23andMe, and then they changed it to, oh no, you're not allowed anymore. It's like, let's keep this, you can only, I guess you can only find out if you work with a doctor. I mean, I think it's great that people work for a doctor, but I don't think this information should be withheld from the public.
No, I agree. I totally agree. Because at the same time, well, okay, when you get your genetics, you want to be properly counseled so that you don't freak out. So what we're seeing right now, or in recent days, we'll say, is Chris Hemsworth, Thor, my boyfriend. Not really my boyfriend. I just want him to be. So he gets a positive ApoE4 and basically says, I'm done acting. I want to spend time with my family. And it's that extreme. Okay. I mean, good for you for backing off and spending time with your family. But it's like, Chris, you can keep making movies, because if you do lifestyle changes now, I mean, obviously you're taking care of yourself, you're fit, you're healthy, you must be eating something right to look like that, or taking hormones or whatever.
But it is true, if you're making movies, it is a very stressful, part of it can be a stressful process. And we know that stress is associated with Alzheimer's. So you figure out how to make it a less stressful experience. Yeah.
Right. You find the balance in your life. And that's really the message that you're giving right now is, you can do things now. You can do things now to make the changes of how you're going to age.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I would just view this as information that you can control. And I would much rather prevent versus, as opposed to, I mean, just to be clear, the healthcare system, the traditional healthcare system we're in right now in the United States is no. You don't do anything until you have symptoms and a disease. And then and only then are you allowed to try to treat it. It's like just put your blinders on, and it's like, so it's a completely different approach. And the insurance model is the same way. It's like, no, you can't we won't pay for any prevention. We're only going to pay once you've had a heart attack. Yeah, then we'll pay for cardiac rehab and to get you on the right lifestyle path, but not beforehand.
Not before. No, exactly. Exactly. So who are the type of people, are there people like, is it like me coming to you saying, Dr. Josh, please help me because I have this family history and I don't want to go down that path? Or who are the type of people that are interested in doing something about it now?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I'd say it's both what you're describing, people who, look ahead and say, 20, 30, 40 years from now, I don't want to get Alzheimer's, but it's also people with early Alzheimer's, mild cognitive impairment, et cetera, who are like, you know what? I can't remember how to get home. This is more than just forgetting my keys. This is happening every day. But often it's not just the person with early Alzheimer's that wants to get it reversed. It's also their family members who say, wait, I know there's some genetic part of this. And, mom is 30 years older than me. Well, I don't want to get this. So I'd say it's both. And I think it's appropriate for it to be both.
So we can stop it. So let me back up. when my mom had Alzheimer's, the progression of, I guess you call it dementia first, and then it progresses into Alzheimer's. But she had it for about 7 years. So in the very, very beginning stages, and my sister's a geriatric doctor, but she's not functional or integrative. So she's standard of care. So we put her on a medication. And even my sister said at the time, this isn't going to cure it. This is just really to slow down the progress of the disease. And we really don't have a cure at this time. So I guess my question is, you're saying that people come to you early on. If they make changes in those early signs of memory loss, is it possible to reverse it or stop it without drugs? And are there any drugs on the market now that are effective since that time? I mean, that was, like I said, probably 7 to 9 years ago.
Yeah. So the exciting thing is, yes, there definitely been many different developments in the last 7 to 10 years.
Okay.
So, and the quick answer is yes. Lifestyle changes. In my hands, I've seen people be able to reverse it. Also using different types of IVs, different supplements. But to me, one of the most exciting things is that there's a brand new drug that's FDA approved for compassionate use that's showing some really good results without brain bleed and brain swelling. The newest drugs that were actually brought to the market have like a 1 in 3 or higher risk of getting a bleed in the brain and other things like that, which to me, that's not helpful.
No.
So what I'm excited about is, there's this FDA approved for compassionate use drug that, we're seeing good results, and it hasn't gone through all the stages, but fortunately we don't have to wait 6 or 7 more years. We can make it available to patients today. So yeah, there's definitely hope, and I think the best approach is to layer all these different modalities together, and but no one's really heard about this, and I'd say about a third of the public is kind of describes what you say. Well, obviously there's no cure, so why should I do anything? And if I mention something new, they're like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Well, and then even in the integrative functional world, if you start going down that rabbit hole, now I know, Daniel Amen clinics, you can get a brain scan, but to me, I'm almost overwhelmed by that because I have to travel to a clinic, then I have to do the scan, then I'm going to have to travel again and get a repeat scan. And it's like, even if you have the money to do that, that's a lot of time and pressure. And listen, I get it. I mean, for your health, do you take that extra step? But I would rather talk to you and work with you and say, what can I do right now in my home where I don't have to spend a boatload of money or travel? Is it that important to get a brain scan, or can we kind of know, like myself, know genetics, or know that in another person's signs and symptoms, they're starting to happen, they're starting to rear their ugly head, and we can do changes now without a brain scan?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think for people without any symptoms, you got to wait. I mean, I prefer PET scans to SPECT. I know Dr. Amen is into SPECT scans. I get much better resolution with the PET scan with neuroquant imaging. And I can actually see which parts of the brain are not functioning well, and potentially see, like, are there infections? Are there toxins? What is going on? So I would say, I think it's great to have that as an option for patients, but I wouldn't say you have to get a brain scan in order to make some, lifestyle changes, et cetera. And, but I do like functional scans, but, to me, this should be something you work with a doctor and figure out what, where you are and what's best for you, without any pressure.
Well, so, okay, let's say we work together. You could order a PET scan for me that I could have done locally where I don't have to travel, and then you can interpret the results from there.
That's true. And again, you want something called neuroquant imaging, where you can actually look at the different parts of the brain. So the answer is yes, you can.
Now, is that a specialty test in, like, where you have to go, or could you just do that at an imaging center with the correct write-up, with the correct order?
It can be a little bit challenging, to be honest,
To find a place
because
that does it. Yeah.
yeah, because it's not just getting a PET scan. You want this overlaid software, and it shouldn't be difficult. I found sometimes it is difficult to get. It's been easier when I practiced in Florida when patients travel here to Florida just to get it when they arrive. And again, I'm not against just doing a CAT scan or MRI of the brain just to look for structural changes. But to me, function is even more important because that's what we're talking about here. You want to make sure that all your brain is functioning. But again, if you're just interested in general prevention, I don't know that you need a scan.
Okay.
Because the scan comes with radiation, and of course, we want to minimize radiation to the brain.
That is true. So how important is it to use your brain to, you'll see people doing Sudoku just to stimulate the brain. How important is that as we age?
I think, I mean, the studies are showing that it is important, but there's a little nuance that I want your viewers and listeners to understand, which is that what we're seeing now is it's not so much recollection. Like if you do, it used to be like everyone says, oh yeah, do crossword puzzles because that'll save your memory. And there's nothing wrong with crossword puzzles, but if you think what crossword puzzles are asking for, they're asking you to recall, this, 6-letter word. What's better is to ask your brain to do new types of activities like learn a new language, pick up a new hobby, a new art, play an instrument, music, So I would say, novelty, travel to a new place, all those things I think are going to be more impactful than doing crossword puzzles. Nothing wrong with crossword, but it's asking your brain to do something new is actually it's more stressful, but you get better results from the brain.
So my plan to never retire and continue working and learning new things is right on point as long as I'm not overly stressed out.
That's a perfect plan. I like it.
Exactly. I like it. Now, what about supplements? You had mentioned omega-3 for those with that positive ApoE4. So what about?
Well, and specifically higher doses. I find patients who are ApoE4 positive require much higher doses of omega-3, whether they're getting it from their diet or from supplements or both. It's just, and it makes sense to me because the ApoE4 is a cholesterol transporter, so it's not working the same way in those people.
So that if it's a cholesterol transporter, then essentially we want the omega-3s in the system to transport the cholesterol from the brain, that amyloid plaque, or we want the good cholesterol just circulating more?
Yeah, so we want the good fats, the omega-3. You want higher amounts there, which helps stabilize membranes and decrease inflammation. The amyloid, and you don't want lots of amyloid plaque. That's true. I'm just saying that it all seems to fit together. That it's you want this individualized normally.
Right. So are there any other supplements that are kind of standard protocol that you like to use?
Yeah, so there are many. The ones that I would start with, I'm a big fan of nitric oxide supplements because nitric oxide is this gas that opens up blood vessels, including blood vessels to the brain. That's one category. Another category I like is something called creatine.
Yeah.
And creatine, people think it's for bodybuilders to build up muscle. And it's true, 95% of the creatine is used to build muscles, but 5% we now know is used as a neurotransmitter.
Yeah.
And the creatine is a neurotransmitter in the brain. So I'm a big fan of supplementing creatine for the brain. And then the other category that I normally like is NMN, nicotinamide mononucleotide, which is a great supplement to reverse aging, including aging of the brain. But I mean, there's so many more. But you got to start someplace. And I don't normally want to overwhelm people to begin with. I mean, I like essential oils, like rosemary essential oil, seems to be neuroprotective, and yeah.
Now, what about pregnenolone? I'm always telling my patients that pregnenolone has been shown to be neuroprotective, and it serves as kind of like a backbone for hormone production as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. Pregnenolone was like one of the original anti-aging supplements. I think it's reasonable if you're going to potentially start a patient on it, is to actually check their levels.
Yeah.
Um, and to me, you're fine tuning that with all the other hormones too. So to me, that's just part of hormone replacement.
Oh yeah, and I always check pregnenolone, and it scares me. Just the patient today, less than 10, not non-existent whatsoever. And we know so that's going to tie into stress. If your pregnenolone's low, chances are you've been stressed, which is also going to contribute to the progression of Alzheimer's and dementia, because the adrenal glands will steal pregnenolone to make cortisol. Now there's debate out there. Well, it doesn't really steal it, but anyways, you're going to see a drop in your pregnenolone if you're all stressed out because your adrenals need it. So I think that also nurtures the adrenals and helps with stress. Now,
Yeah,
is there
agreed.
anything else that I missed in terms of causes and the categories of, and or what we should be doing?
Yeah. So I talked a little bit stress. You definitely want lower stress levels. You also want connection. So something about whether you're with your family, friends, there's something about connection. And I think part of that actually, in terms of keeping your brain active, if you can imagine you're sitting at a dinner party, with five other people, that's a real stimulator for the brain, right? Because you're trying to monitor, potentially five different conversations. You're thinking about what people said and then what you're going to say. I mean, it's definitely a stress test, but we're designed to be social animals and to be around other people. So I find, it's much better to be connected than a hermit out there all by yourself.
That's so true. And all the tips you've given us today are just simple and applicable and actionable. They're all
And
things that we could
I
do.
would give one more exercise. Exercise is
Yes.
definitely key for stimulating BDNF, growth factors for the brain. And people normally sleep better if they've exercised during the day.
Yeah. So let's expand on that exercise component. So we know that exercise decreases or improves insulin sensitivity, decreases insulin resistance, improves insulin sensitivity. And then, of course, the host of benefits for body composition, fat loss, muscle, better glucose control, all of that. Is there actual data that shows that exercise can help with prevention of Alzheimer's?
Definitely. Yeah, the studies looking at risk factors, exercise dramatically decrease your risk of getting Alzheimer's.
Okay. Yeah. Just like, I mean, we're seeing the hormones and everything. So everything really combines with each other to decrease your risk. And everything that you've said, again, simple, applicable. Going just one step deeper, my last question for you would be the peptide arena that we are now in, where, I mean, there's peptides everywhere, peptide talk everywhere. And I find them very valuable. I've used them post-surgery. Obviously, we know that the GLPs are peptide derivatives and they are peptides, just that Big Pharma has bastardized them for profit. But are there any, that's a side note, but are there any peptides that you feel are beneficial for people like myself or Chris Hemsworth to start on now?
Yeah, so I mean, it's such a wide field. I agree they're important. And in my own practice, I've used exosomes, which are basically a collection of 500 different peptides intravenously to stimulate brain growth. And I've seen good results. It can take a few months to
Mm-hmm.
see the maximum results. I'm a fan of thymosin to improve your immune system. I mean, but this has to be on an individual basis. Yeah, unfortunately, they're under severe regulatory control, so it can be difficult to get them. But I think they're important. For whatever reason, now it's a lot easier to get them orally than other routes.
Yeah. Yeah. And that makes it easier for people to use too, because some people are
Right.
freaked out by the needles. Yeah.
Right.
So
But I would say it's as part of everything else. But I don't think, you're going to find a magic peptide that's going to completely reverse Alzheimer's. It's got to be part of, it could be a piece of the puzzle.
Piece of the puzzle. Exactly. And that's really how most peptides are. There's not going to be one that's going to heal you miraculously from surgery, but BPC and TB500 really help, that kind of thing. So you just put it into your repertoire. What about, I know I said last question, but I really have a last question. What about protein? I talk about protein in terms of longevity to help you maintain muscle. The last thing we want as we age is sarcopenia, loss of muscle. That equals breaking bones and injuries. And that's where you fracture your hip and end up in the hospital and die. So protein has its benefits. Is there any correlation with protein intake and, again, reduction of our risk?
I'm not as much of a fan of protein. Now,
really?
Yeah,
why?
really. Well, let me tell you why.
Okay.
I mean, this has just been my clinical experience. And again, we're talking about today, not 100 years ago. Very few people are deficient in protein. Now, if you find those people, sure, who are not absorbing anything, they may have mold toxicity, can't absorb, and their protein levels are very low. Yes, definitely, we need to get those people up. But the problem with too high a level of protein is you get higher levels of mTOR, which in turn speeds up your biologic clock and promotes aging. So I understand if you just look at what's marketed out there, people are like, oh, you need all this protein. I'm in the other camp, and it's just based on the research that shows if you're taking a lot of protein, your levels of IGF-1 go up, which could put you at an increased risk of cancer, etc. So I'm not a fan of just taking huge amounts of protein and hoping for the best. But I know I may not be the majority, and we're in different camps there. But I just, based on looking at lab tests, very few people now are deficient in protein. So yeah, that's my approach.
That's okay. I welcome differences of opinion because it, like you said, it really depends on, hey, what are you targeting? So if I have someone coming in and they want to lose weight and they're in their 40s and they keep putting on fat mass and they're insulin resistant, well, obviously we have to bring up the protein because they're eating too many crappy carbs, and that's contributing to the whole scenario of what's going on with them. But like you said, from the very beginning, individualized approach. Like we can say, do this for the masses, but then you get really granular when you're working with an individual person.
Exactly. Yeah.
So Dr. Josh, can you tell people if they are interested? I mean, you do so much more than Alzheimer's treatment. So you have the clinic in Florida. What else are you specializing in? What's your love? What's your jam these days? And then how people can find you and possibly work with you?
Yeah. So yeah, my background, I can do lots of different things, but I've chosen to specialize in reversing Alzheimer's just because there aren't a lot of other physicians in that space, and there's such a huge need. And probably the best way to reach me is through my website, which is just drjosh.com, drjosh.com.
Mm-hmm.
And my email address is just drjosh, drjosh at drjosh.com, drjosh.com. So that's probably, and I'm on social media. So.
That makes it easy. And we'll put it in the show notes as well. Well, thank you so much for your time and your knowledge today. I greatly appreciate it. Like I said, I've been wanting to do this topic for over 400 episodes, and now we're finally here.
All right. This is a lot of fun.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Josh, so much.
Thanks, Amy. All right. Bye-bye.